Okay, guys, so we're starting our IGCSE biology, and our first and foremost aim is to complete the syllabus within a month or two, which seems rapid right now, but trust me, just trust the process right now. And after this, we will start our past paper session, which would be near your school marks. So let's start with the first chapter, diffusion. So, by definition, diffusion is basically the net movement of molecules and ions from a region of high concentration to a region of lower concentration down the concentration gradient. So, up, up till now, it might sound like words to you, but let me break it down. The net movement of molecules and ions from a region of higher concentration. So, what do you mean by a region of higher concentration? And what is our concentration gradient? A concentration gradient, to think about it as this diagram, right? So what is a concentration gradient? A concentration, over here we have a high concentration and over here we have low concentration, and imagine this as a slope and imagine footballs going downhill. So over here we have a store of footballs, and over here we don't have footballs. This is a plain land over here, right? So we are releasing footballs on this ramp like thing, and they're going downhill. So basically they're going from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, and this is basically called a steep gradient. It is a basic math concept. When you do your O or A levels or even SAT mathematic graphs, you would understand what a gradient is. So this is a steep gradient, and think of it as footballs going downhill. So that is how it's going down the concentration gradient from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration. So imagine these footballs are your molecules, your ions. Sorry. Yeah. So the real world examples we have of diffusion is a spraying perfume. So let's suppose you spray perfume at this corner and you're standing over here. So when you spray perfume over here, then after a specific interval of time, you would smell the perfume in this corner as well. And how does this happen? This happens because of diffusion, because over here there is higher concentration of the specific perfume, and you're standing over here. So from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. Secondly, rotten egg in one corner of a room. So let's suppose, again, this is an egg, a pink egg for some reason, I have no clue why. And this is you standing here, right? So eggs, they have this thing, it's called H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide. You know, the that rotten eggy smell. I don't even like cooked eggs because I think they smell weird as well. But anyhow, think of that smell, right? And you're standing here, but somehow that smell, it reaches your nose. How? The question is, and the answer is diffusion. So you're standing here, the pink egg is here, and the hydrogen sulfide, that rotten, bad smell, it somehow or the other it reaches you over here, right? तो the question is, ये कैसे हुआ? ये इसकी वजह से हुआ कि एक concentration gradient था, यहाँ ज़्यादा उसकी स्मेल थी, इधर कम थी, and it came down the concentration gradient like this. So I hope the whole concept of diffusion is kind of clear, or you have a better version of it in your brains right now. So iske baad, let's think a bit like your examiner, right? So in your IGCSE P2s and P4s, and I think O levels का P1 P2 होता है, उसके अंदर you can get in your P1s MCQs, and mostly in your P4s, in your long questions, you can have these examples. First is CO2 in, O2 out, a basic plant's photosynthesis का concept. Secondly, gas exchange in humans. So basically you inhale, I mean, you don't entirely inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. You inhale air in and you exhale air out, which have specific compositions of CO2 and O2 that we would definitely discuss in the further chapters. But the basic concept of gas exchange is, opposite of photosynthesis. O2 in, CO2 out. How is that happening? Diffusion. Absorption of food in ileum. I think in your books it's written glucose in your small intestines, and it is a very recurring um, question in your P1s, or it comes as a part of a question in your P2s, O level P1, P2s, and IGCSE P2s and P4s. I think you guys know that at this point. Anyhow, and flowering plants use diffusion to attract pollinators, right? So you have a flower here, with that a rose with a good smell. So by diffusion, it spreads its smell and attracts, let's suppose, a bee, to get its nectar, and the whole process of pollination, a basic biology concept again. So we have some factors which affect diffusion. First is distance. So if there is a lot of distance from point A to point B, तो ज़्यादा टाइम लगेगा यहाँ तक पहुँचते हुए, टाइम भी ज़्यादा लगेगा, और यहाँ तक पॉइंट बी तक जो आपकी स्मेल होगी या वट एवर XYZ molecular ion, it would have to cover more distance, so less molecules would be diffused here, or less intensity of smell. Get it? So that's the basic thing about this. And temperature. So about temperature, there is this chemistry or concept over here ke your kinetic, with increase in temperature there is increase in kinetic energies of your molecules and ions, and because of that they move faster and they have more velocity. There is an aspect of chemistry here, there's an aspect of physics here, but the basic concept is that if there's more temperature, if it gets more hotter, then the diffusion of that XYZ thing increases. And and this thing is a bit basic. If there's more concentration, there's more diffusion, just like what I showed you guys over here. More concentration here, steeper the gradient, more diffusion, right? So let's move on to the next subtopic, osmosis. Now osmosis is something new for you guys here at this point, right? So I tried to break osmosis. Let's start with a definition. Osmosis is the movement of water from higher water potential to lower water potential. Now, A, movement of water, B, from higher water potential, C, to lower water potential, and through a partially permeable membrane. I'll explain this. So, in basic words, in basic terms, this is diffusion of water. ये डिफ्यूजन हो रही है बट पानी के अंदर, और पानी कर रही है. नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज कि from where do we know high water potential or low water potential? So the answer is here. Water potential basically is a scientific connotation or a scientific word for concentration of water, right? Because if you directly say the word concentration of water, it would apply in a solute, right? A solute like sugar is dissolved in water, so that is sugar's concentration XYZ in water. So we use the word higher water potential or lower water potential for the word concentration. It's just a term thing, but at the basic understanding it is concentration, right? On a higher level, scientifically speaking, it does not mean concentration, but I think by now you get the crux of it. Now the second confusing part which I have highlighted here was partially permeable membrane. ठीक है, एक partially permeable membrane होता क्या है? Firstly, basic osmosis we see here, we have a partially permeable and semi-permeable. By the way, it means the same thing. अच्छा, तो water, you have a sugar molecule here, and you have water here, and you have a lot of sugar molecules here on the right side, but you have less on left side. So there is osmosis of water only, not the sugar molecule itself, right? We can see over here on a better diagram as well. There is only the movement of water, there is not the movement of the sugar molecule. And the basic reason is, if you closely see this barrier between the partial permeable membrane, it does not allow this huge molecule to come here. But what it can do is it can allow this small red water molecule to move here or there, right? So that is the concept of partially permeable membranes. So think of it as a gate, or a gate with some doors that only opens for a specific person, and that person is water. Why? Because water is not, it doesn't have a big size, राइट जैसे कि एक दरवाज़ा है, ये सिर्फ इस पानी के मॉलिक्यूल को फिट कर सकता है, इसको नहीं कर सकता है, क्योंकि आई मीन एट द एंड ऑफ द डे इसका साइज़ बहुत बड़ा है, ये इस पार्शली परमेबल मेम्ब्रेन को कभी क्रॉस ही नहीं कर पाएगा. So that's why this is a very important concept over here. Partially permeable membrane is essential for osmosis. Okay, so now we need to quickly understand a very important concept for osmosis. And to understand that beforehand, we need to understand two basic things. Firstly is the general cell membrane layout. The general cell membrane layout is again in the cells chapter, but over here we know this is a cell, right? हमें पता है ये आपका एक cell है, and this thing is called the cell membrane, which is the thing which encloses all the contents of the cell. And the cell membrane, think of it like a gate which controls what's going in and out. Hence, again, the cell membrane is also partially permeable. And this, by the way, is an animal cell. The cases that I'm going to discuss, you have to understand one thing, that in all the cases, a cell is kept in a solution. Just imagine कि ये एक बीकर है, इसके अंदर एक सिंगल सेल, जो कि इतना पॉसिबल नहीं होता है, बिकॉज ऑफ कोर्स द सेल्स आर रियली स्मॉल, बट लेट्स सपोज कि एक सिंगल सेल हमने स्पीकर के अंदर एक XYZ सोल्यूशन के अंदर डाल के रख दिया. ठीक, तो इफ we have a lot of cases. The first case for animal cell, I repeat, for an animal cell, is hypertonic solution. So hypertonic solution is basically pure water, right? So if we talk about the cell over here, the same cell, imagine there is pure water outside, so there's more water outside the cell as compared to the inside of the cell, right? So this is an after picture, but over here imagine there's more water here and there's less water inside, so this thing is called a hypertonic solution, right? And as we have discussed, so if there's more water here and less water here, then water would travel from here to here. This is the basic and the integral concept of osmosis, right? तो अगर हम आगे चलें, if we have a hypertonic solution, we have established the fact that in pure water there's more water outside the cell and there's less water inside. So what is the result? The result is that the cell swells up, it becomes bigger, it swells up to its threshold. मतलब वो cell stretch कर जाता है उस point तक जितने तक उसकी वो stretch कर सकता है, then it eventually bursts, just like here. अब ये एक cell है, ये इसका cell membrane है, pure water था, बाहर ज़्यादा पानी था, osmosis हुआ, बाहर से अंदर पानी आया, and it swelled up and it eventually burst. This is the basic case of a hypertonic solution in an animal cell. Now we have another case 2, a hypertonic. That was hypotonic, this is hypertonic. So in hypertonic, it's basically the opposite of a hypotonic. There is less water outside cell, there is more water inside the cell, and it happens in a concentrated solution, not in pure water, right? तो ये वही cell है और मैंने उसको एक hypertonics में रख दिया है. तो we have more water here and we have less water here. So if we have more water here and we have less water here, so water would move like this. Again, the integral concept of osmosis that we've discussed in this very video. So growing with this, what is the result? The animal cell would shrink and it would shrivel up and it would have a spiky appearance. So it would have a spiky appearance, and there's this word called crenation or crenated. It it mostly applies to RBCs, but we can also say that cells are crenated. and these are the marking scheme words: cremated, spiky, shrivels up and shrinks. And if I show you what happens, this is the spiky appearance. Why? क्योंकि इसके अंदर जितना पानी था वो बाहर आ गया. It lost its shape. So this is the basic animal cell cases in a hypertonic and a hypertonic solution. Now there's another type of solution, it's called isotonic solution. Basically isotonic solution के अंदर there's same concentration in and out, and because we have same concentration in and out of the cell, there is no net movement, hence there's no osmosis. Now we're done with animal cells, by the way. So when we come to plant cells, we need to establish a fact that plant cells have a fully permeable cell wall, right? We would again learn about this in the cells chapter, but plant cells basically have a fully permeable cell wall. So in the same hypertonic solution where we have more water outside the cell as compared to inside, so what is the result? The result in a plant cell is different. It's something new for you, and let's try to learn it. Firstly, it would take in water by osmosis and it would not burst, unlike the animal cell. As the cell wall is much stronger than the cell membrane, the cell wall would apply a thing which is called turgor pressure, and it would increase the turgidity, which is like a tire, right? So think of the cell wall as a tire, and as you inflate the cell wall, it would just swell up, it won't burst, right? This is the concept of a cell wall. So what's happening here is there is no visual change over here, right? Nothing is changed. Even though there is more water inside, this is a hypertonic solution. But because of the turgidity of the cell wall and the turgor pressure applied by the cell wall, nothing is happening. So this is the case of hypertonic solution, in a plant cell. Now, what about a hypertonic solution? Because now we have established the fact that there is a cell wall over here which won't allow the cell to burst. I mean, it would allow water to come in, but it won't allow it to burst. It's like think of it as a wall of China, which would not allow the Mongols to come in. I mean, weird example, but yeah. So hypertonic solution, which is again opposite of hypertonic, basically water diffuses out and the vacuole shrinks. What is a vacuole? We would learn in your cells chapter, but I mean, uh, as it's January, I'm thinking you guys know what's a vacuole and what's a cell wall. Anyhow, so the cell membrane tears away and the cell is called plasmolysed or flaccid. Again, the words I've highlighted in yellow are basically marking scheme words, and the important words that are new for you, and you need to have a conceptual understanding behind them. So the cell would be plasmolysed or flaccid, whatever you want to call it, and the cell wall, however, would remain intact. Let's learn here what's happening, right? So basically, water is out because it is a hypertonic solution, right? Because this place had less water as compared to this place, right? So now what would happen is, this is the cell membrane. The cell membrane would shrink, just like, so what's happening over here now is just like an animal cell. Animal cell में भी spiky हो जाता था, वो भी crenation की तरफ जाता था, but what's stopping it over here is the cell wall. Again, the cell wall would remain at its very position, but it won't be it won't truly turn spiky like an animal cell on the outlook, because only the cell membrane has shrinked up, not the cell wall. That is the basic concept. Cell wall वहीं remain करती है. By the way, a cell wall is not yellow. It is supposed to be transparent. This is this is not in grade 9-10 knowledge. This is an MTK identity test knowledge, but yeah, just a heads up. Anyhow, so this is the concept of hypertonic solution in a plant cell. And again, for isotonic solution in a plant cell, the cases are same, because पानी बाहर भी सेम है, अंदर भी सेम है, सेल को कोई फर्क पड़ेगा ही नहीं. बट यहाँ उससे पड़ेगा, वो फ्लैसिड हो जाएगा, वो प्लाज्मोलाइज हो जाएगा. इसकी एक रियल वर्ल्ड एग्जांपल देखो ना, तो किसी प्लांट की किसी लीफ, आई मीन वी डोंट हैव ब्लू प्लांट्स विद ब्लू लीव्स ओवर हियर, अच्छा ग्रीन में, अच्छा हाँ. सो दिस इज़ अ लीफ राइट. ये एक टर्गेट लीफ है, इसके अंदर पानी है, इसकी शेप है. ये लीफ जो कि विच इज़ अ बिट विल्टेड, this is a flaccid or a plasmolized leaf. This is the basic difference between turgid and plasmolysis. ये एक फ्लैसिड लीफ है, ये एक प्लाज्मोलाइज्ड लीफ है, क्योंकि इसके अंदर पानी नहीं है, बाहर चला गया. चूँकि इसके अंदर पानी है, ये टर्जिड है और इट इज़ इन एन erected position. So yeah, that is, we have wrapped up osmosis, and we would learn about active transport in the next video. Thank you. Alright guys, so we're continuing with our third part of this chapter, that is active transport. Now let's start with the definition. It says that the movement of molecules and ions in or out of the cell through a transport protein against the concentration gradient using ATP. Now we have learned three new things in this topic. Transport protein, against the concentration gradient, and using ATP. Now let's go step by step. What is a transport protein? ठीक, ये एक ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन है. थिंक ऑफ इट एज अ गेट. मतलब मैंने पहले भी कहा था कि सेल मेम्ब्रेन इज़ अ गेट, बट थिंक ऑफ दिस एज एन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक गेट, जो कि सिर्फ एनर्जी देने पे खुलता है, वो वैसे ही नहीं खुलता. सो दिस इज़ अ ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन. व्हाट इट बेसिकली डज इज़ कि आपके सेल मेम्ब्रेन के अंदर जब ग्लूकोज आता है, सो द ग्लूकोज मॉलिक्यूल व्हेन इट एंटर्स द ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन, the shape of the transport protein changes. So like when you enter your house, when the gate opens, आपकी गेट की शेप चेंज होती है, गेट खुलता है, so there is a space created, hence the glucose is there. Now the last thing is the change of shape of the transport protein pushes the glucose molecules into the cell. अब इसकी वजह से इसकी शेप इस तरह चेंज हुई है, तो ग्लूकोज मॉलिक्यूल अंदर आ जाता है. Now there are different types of transport proteins. It's channel protein and carrier protein, but that is again A-level knowledge. कि ये जो change of shape हो रही है, इसको एनर्जी तो चाहिए. जब गेट खुलता है, लेट्स सपोज इट्स एन इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली पावर्ड गेट, तो बिजली तो यूज़ होती है, उस पर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी तो यूज़ होती है. हैंस फोर्थ, इस गेट को खोलने के लिए, इस ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन को खोलने के लिए आपको ATP चाहिए. एंड ATP इज समथिंग वी लर्न moving onwards, but it is in the chapter respiration, and at this point just think of ATP as energy. Respiration होती है, ग्लूकोज टूटता है, ATP मिलता है. दैट इज़ द बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग, द फंडामेंटल कॉन्सेप्ट बिहाइंड इट. तो एक चीज़ तो क्लियर होगी कि ATP यूज़ होगा तो ये गेट खुलेगा और जो भी XYZ मॉलिक्यूल है वो अंदर जाएगा. ठीक, दो चीज़ें यहाँ से क्रिएट हो गई. ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन क्लियर हो गया, ATP क्लियर हो गया. अब एक चीज़ एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट की है, दैट इज अगेंस्ट द कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ग्रेडियंट. अब एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट एक ऐसा टॉपिक है, लेट्स सपोज यू इन ग्रेड 9 और इन योर O levels राइट नाउ, इट वुड हेल्प यू in your A levels, and it would also help you in your MBBS, because active transport is a very very basic function of biology in human bodies and plants alike. अब अगेंस्ट द कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ग्रेडियंट पे जब हम आते हैं, डू यू रिमेंबर दिस पिरामिड थिंग जो मैंने पहले बनाई थी? तो उसमें क्या था कि फुटबॉल्स ऊपर से नीचे जाती थी, बट इसमें लुक हियर, लुक एट द एरो, इसमें उलट हो रहा है. फुटबॉल्स नीचे से ऊपर जा रही हैं, फ्रॉम द लोअर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन टू द हायर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन. मतलब इफ़ देयर इज अ स्टीप ग्रेडियंट, तब तो वो आराम से चली जाती है नीचे, बट यहाँ तो फुटबॉल ऊपर से नीचे जा रही हैं अगेंस्ट द कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ग्रेडियंट in its unnatural way, right? So how is this happening? This is happening because of this pump. Think of this as a pump. ये pump क्या करता है? ये फुटबॉल्स को पुश कर रहा है, फुटबॉल ऊपर जा रही है. And this pump uses ATP made during respiration to pump the ions, right? So this is basically pushing these molecules from lower concentration to the higher concentration. So that's how you travel against the concentration gradient. आपने lower concentration से higher concentration पे जाना है. Now the question arises कि हम पहले तो हमेशा higher से lower जा रहे थे, तो इधर हमें क्या ऐसी ज़रूरत पड़ी कि we have to go from lower concentration to higher. Now we have to come to the prime examples जो कि P1s और P2s में, P2s और P4s में आपके काम आएगी. और हमेशा ये दो एग्जांपल्स ही आती हैं, रूट हेयर सेल्स एंड ग्लूकोज. लेट्स स्टार्ट विद ग्लूकोज फर्स्ट. बड़ी सिंपल सी चीज़ है कि ग्लूकोज जो होता है इट इज़ एब्जॉर्ब फ्रॉम ल्यूमन टू द सेल्स ऑफ द विलाई. ये होता ये है कि दिस इज़ द ल्यूमन, यहाँ ग्लूकोज है, ये आपके विलाई के सेल्स हैं, इधर से ये जाता है अंदर थ्रू एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट. आगे के चैप्टर्स हैं, बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग्स कर लो, देन वील लर्न दैट बाद में. सेकेंड इज कि जी रूट हेयर सेल्स. रूट हेयर सेल्स का बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट ये कि आयंस एंड मिनरल्स दे डू मूव अगेंस्ट द ग्रेडियंट एंड अगेन यूजिंग एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट. बट इसकी वजह ये है एज द प्लांट हैज़ हायर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन देन द सॉइल. सो बेसिकली व्हाट हैपन्स हियर इज दैट दिस इज़ द सॉइल, अ ब्लू सॉइल फॉर सम रीज़न, एंड दिस इज़ द ग्रीन प्लांट. अब इस ग्रीन प्लांट के अंदर ऑलरेडी मैग्नीशियम या वट एवर आयन्स जो चाहिए होते हैं वो हैं, राइट, एंड उसके पास इससे ज़्यादा है. इट हैज़ मोर एम जी एज कम्पेयर टू द सॉइल, बट देर इज स्टिल सम मैग्नीशियम लेफ्ट इन द सॉइल. और प्लांट जो होता है ना वो बड़ा ग्रीडी होता है. वो कहता है कि ये जो तुम्हारे पास मैग्नीशियम है ना मुझे ये भी चाहिए. तो इसके लिए वो उल्टा एनर्जी स्पेंड करता है, वो पैसे देता है, वो एटीपी करता है, लेकिन वो ये जो मैग्नीशियम इसमें लोअर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन में और एक अननेचुरल मेथड से आएगा, वो फिर भी उसको लेता है. सो दिस इज़ द होल कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट्स, all summarized in one page. I hope you understood the whole chapter.